I will go ahead and call this regular meeting of the Darien Board of Finance to order for Tuesday, August 17th, 2021. Thanks to everyone for coming. We've got our team complete except for Paul Hendrickson, who cannot make it tonight. Okay, so as we've done in the past, I will start off. If anyone has any public comment that they would like to make before we start our meeting, we've gone back to Zoom given the mask mandate at Town Hall, so hopefully this is a convenient format for everybody. Jennifer or Jim, you guys seeing anyone raising their hand for a public comment?
I do not, John.
Okay. All right, great. So we're going to go a little out of order just because we've got a couple of folks on the phone that we can hopefully get out early this evening. First one is we'll go ahead and discuss the one fiscal year 22 transfer that we have. So this is for police and some uniforms and equipment. Looks like new handcuffs as well. And we have Chief Anderson actually on the call to take us through that, and Jennifer as well. Chief, you there? There you are. Nice to see you, sir.
I am here, folks. I can't see me, so if you can see me, you're one step ahead of me.
You are fetchingly handsome, not to worry. Okay, so
okay. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be for you.
Go ahead.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me. I'm having a little bit of trouble on my end, but it's been identified that finally they have built a better mousetrap as far as handcuffs go. Handcuffs have largely been unchanged for the last 100 years. We identified there are handcuffs available that are slightly larger. They're forged rather than stamped. And use of handcuffs is a use of force. So we like to have the best equipment out there for the protection of both the officers and the suspects or someone being detained. So we would have put this on in a budget request, but we didn't want to wait until next budget year to actually get these handcuffs. And I put on my risk manager's hat and my liability avoidance hat. So I think it's an expenditure to equip all of our officers with a new style handcuff. The main thing that I like about handcuffs is that the keyway is on both sides. Many times we're putting handcuffs on people that are not compliant, and you try to get them on with the keyway going out. In this case, keyway will be on both sides of the handcuff. We're looking for a transfer from our uniform, which actually our personal protective gear account, which is ballistic vests. And as you may know, we budget for ballistic vests in its entirety for the entire expense, but we were very fortunate to get 50% reimbursement from the federal government through the Ballistic Vest Partnership Program. We cannot guarantee that Congress will pass that every year, but this year they have. They've assured us we'll be getting a 50% match back for ballistic vests, freeing up some of the money in that account for the ability to purchase these handcuffs for all officers. I believe the Board of Finance did get and attached to the transfer request a cut sheet that explains what these handcuffs are and the difference between the handcuffs that we've been using for the last 100 years.
Yeah, this all seemed pretty clear and straightforward, and sounds like something every department's going to do in terms of updating their approach to this. Anyone have any questions for the chief?
No.
Okay, no questions. The only thing I was disappointed in was at the end of the description from the supplier. It says you might also like as a suggestion for other things, and I just wondered what they would be suggesting there. Anyway. But I think this is good investment. Dan, go ahead.
One quick question. Is there any value in the old handcuffs that can be sold or not?
No, those handcuffs will be decommissioned and they will be cut up. Being that we do identify this new handcuff as being superior, we don't want those handcuffs out on the street. There's no resale value available for those handcuffs. Quite candidly, the handcuffs that I carry were issued to Officer Anderson #1 in 1963. So I think we've got our money's worth out of the handcuffs that were passed down from 2 generations of Andersons in our police department. But they will be recycled, but there's no value to those handcuffs.
Thank you.
Can you keep those for sentimental value?
Mine will go in my my shadow box when I'm done. Chief McManus actually bequeathed those handcuffs to me when Chief Anderson 1 left. So I think those probably will go with me, but they will be decommissioned and no longer in use.
Okay, if there are no other questions, I'm fine with this. Can I get a motion to approve?
Oh, I just want to ask real quick, Chief, I
Sure.
see you've got 65 sets, but you've got 50 cases, and I don't know exactly what the 15 paddle mag combo is, but can you explain that?
Sure. We're going to be getting regular uniform handcuff cases for the uniformed officers. Administrators, desk personnel, and people who work in the building carry a magazine handcuff combination. It's not a whole, it doesn't go on your gun belt, it goes on your regular belt. Some of these extra handcuffs will be used as spares, some will be dedicated training handcuffs. Some of our cars actually get issued handcuffs for an extra pair that's in the car. So that's why we're getting more than 51 officers that we have, but why we only need the 50 cases.
Thanks.
Terrific. Any other questions for the chief? Okay, motion to approve. Okay, Rob, second. Jim, all in favor? Okay, 6-0. Thanks, Chief. We appreciate it, and good luck with this.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate your time.
Okay, terrific. All right, then the other one item that we want to move up is the first transfer. So this is Parks and Rec for some overtime, $9,983. This will be for fiscal 21. And we've got Pam here with us this evening. Pam, good evening. How are you?
Good evening.
Terrific. Can you take us through this?
Yeah, we had some unpredictable storms, and they happened to be very long, tedious storms that took all of the crew into double time, as well as additional event planning that we're now using our crew for too. But in this particular overage, it's about unpredictable storms.
Okay. We've seen these types of transfers before. Any questions for Pam? Okay, well, thank you for that. Motion to approve. Dan, second. Rob, all in favor?
Thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Okay. All right, so now let's go back to the top of the agenda. And we're going to discuss and take action on a request for a special appropriation for the town share of a FEMA grant. I'll turn this over to Jennifer. I see Mark, that you're on the call as well. Thanks for coming. And Kate is here as well. Maybe you guys can, Jennifer, I'll let you kick this off, and maybe Kate or Mark, you can summarize what the Board of Selectmen discussed last night, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Mark is certainly the subject matter expert, but what we're requesting here is the town share, which is 25%. And we are seeking a special appropriation of $128,209 from the general fund. And we'd like to use the fund balance of $39,066 that's in our existing land purchase fund to cover the town's share.
Okay. Mark or Kate, you want to give a little bit more detail about this share of this grant?
Okay, you want to go first?
No, chicken.
Okay. Mr. Chairman and board members, give a little history on the background of this. Since I've been in this position as emergency management director, the town has gone through several severe floods. This property and adjacent properties have suffered severely in past storms, and the homeowner has requested the town seek grant assistance through FEMA. And we have applied approximately 4 times prior. That it seems like forever, to be honest with you. But we have been so far successful in this round in terms of being granted funding for the acquisition of that property. And there was also a co-applicant, if you will, that was to elevate their house. Those grants are for mitigation so that they prevent future losses. And the money was a set aside from the tornadoes back in 2018. Every time there's a presidential disaster declaration, a certain percentage of the assistance goes towards mitigation efforts in the future. So this grant has been applied for, and in all honesty, the numbers that I quoted in my memo to you are fairly significant. There's been 9 flooding events that have totaled claims of over 300,000, and the most recent storm damage is approximately another 300,000. So from a FEMA standpoint, it is pretty clear and obvious that mitigating this property would save a significant portion of future funding assistance. So I would like to also recognize the fact that in the elevation expenses, they were not saying we could not elevate the property. They were hesitant about elevating the property for a few reasons. One is that the cost has almost doubled in value because of COVID and the lumber expenses. And the other reason is because we would not be eliminating the 2-car detached garage, which would still remain in the flood zone and level. So they didn't look highly towards that regard as far as elevating the property, and were cautious and said that we'd have to achieve a few more things before they would allow that expense. The other thing I'd like to go on and mention, there's been some conversation today. For those of you that have not seen this street, several of the homes are in a very low-lying area adjacent to Stony Brook River. Stony Brook River has been identified in some prior studies that we did after the 2007 storms. And as part of this mitigation effort, I believe that there are several people that suffered in the July storm that may apply for future grant funding when it becomes available, which it just so happens that there's funding available due to the last August storm of last year. But the funding is to purchase the property for fair market value, and it's also to demolition 2 structures, one the main house, the other the 2-car detached garage, and also the miscellaneous expenses of closing costs, the appraisal on the house, and also miscellaneous cleanup of any kind of asbestos or anything that may remain on or in the house, which we're fairly confident through all these prior flooding instances that there shouldn't be any, or there should be very minimal amounts of any kind of problem materials in the home. The total cost of the project is $669,100, and 75% of it will be paid by FEMA. The rest of it is an expense that will cover the town's portion, and then the property will transfer into the town name and have to be deeded open space. I hope I covered it thoroughly. I'll take
that's very helpful. So Jim, you had teed up some questions in some earlier exchanges today. Did you want to cover any of the topics that you raised?
Yeah, I guess, one of the questions I had was the overall budget for this, Mark. And I think you pointed out, which I didn't necessarily appreciate from the memo here, is that the 25% that we're funding and the 75% that FEMA will fund covers the entirety of the project, the purchase, the real estate costs, the legal costs, the demolition costs, all of that is sort of budgeted in. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I think you also mentioned that, I listened to your some of the discussion last night at the Board of Selectmen meeting. So some of this might be a repeat, but I think that in terms of the estimate for demolition, I think you mentioned some other properties that we demolished and adjusted that based on escalation size and sort of what we learned there. So you feel pretty good about these estimates?
Yeah, so the original estimate, which was 2 years ago, is based on that project that was done adjacent to a home school. We acquired the property, I believe, as part of a bigger scope of issues with that school property. We used that number, and we utilized, I believe, a percentage to increase over the time frame that was passed. We actually received a quote last week, and I'm happy to report that it was actually less than what we had budgeted for. So at a savings of about $5,000.
Okay. And Mark, that's great that the estimated costs are coming down. If they were to go the other way and there was some extra $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 expense on the demolition, would FEMA still cover 75% of that overage, whatever the final project cost is?
Well, unfortunately, they don't do that. And that's actually one of the first things they make sure everyone understands as you apply for a grant. Ed Gentile was very helpful in helping me with the budget originally. And he was very confident of the numbers based on the projects he's done. And I'm a new grant writer, if you'll say that. It's not really my forte. And I feel confident in the numbers, but at the same time, it's not my property. I have never been really intimate with inside or outside, other than to be on site to offer what assistance we could during an event. But knowing that we've gone through so many rebuilds, it would be hard to believe that things haven't been corrected as needed. I know the permits were pulled on the jobs in the past. We have documentation, the oil tank's been removed back in 2003. So some of those unknowns that I normally would feel we may have, I feel it's limited in this case, though not impossible.
Okay. And you said that the demolition estimate is actually coming in a little bit below what we actually applied for and were granted.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I had a question. Is there any home insurance in this picture that could be accessed, or maybe the town gets subrogated too?
So the homeowner actually is on with us tonight. I can say that they are applying for what's called increased cost of compliance, which is through their flood insurance. And that money, if it does become available, would have to be utilized to decrease the 25% share, as far as we are told by FEMA about 2.5 weeks ago. Part of that is that, and a lot of people aren't even aware of this, there's a FEMA rule, 50% of the damage cannot exceed the cost of the building. And therefore, when you exceed that, you're not even allowed to rebuild the structure without bringing it into compliance. So they're triggered currently with the cost of the damage versus the cost of the appraised value of the house. Just the building, not the property. So they can't rebuild even if they wanted to right now. And we have other properties that are currently in the same problem because of the July 9th storm.
And could the town sell the property to someone who would prepare to build an elevated structure?
No. That unfortunately cannot happen. Once it's acquired, according to FEMA guidelines, it has to be deeded open space, and they do allow some use of the property, but you cannot resell the property and allow building. And they couldn't build anyways because it's non-compliance with the zoning and FEMA regulations for building. It's in the direct path of that Stony Brook River floodway.
And you mentioned adjoining or adjacent properties. How many such properties are there? Or?
So if I was to estimate, we have about 2 properties on that street that have similar circumstances, and another 3 properties on Cherry Street, and potentially another 1 or 2 on Hecker Avenue that all suffer from the same Stony Brook River watershed flooding. Some of the people never step forward. We try to track everyone down and offer assistance where we can. And so I have 7 homeowners currently that are asking for assistance moving forward in similar manners, but it's too early to tell. Some of them may not even have prior claim damage, that is a significant step that you have to take for FEMA. You know, it took, what was the number? About $600,000 worth of damage over 6 storms to get FEMA to actually make the math work, if you will. There's a benefit cost analysis that has to be done, and they have to exceed a certain threshold, which they finally have now.
Thank you.
Taylor, you had a question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's apparent to me why FEMA, is willing to, throw in as much as they are, 75% of the cost of this project. I would like to better understand the interests of the town in putting in the 25%, other than a hefty dose of empathy. How do we justify that expense? Can we value that on the town's balance sheet somehow? Like, what benefit does it provide the town for that $130,000-ish?
Well, let's step back a little bit, and I'll say that as an emergency responder, one of the savings, if you will, is that's one less property that we have to evacuate or rescue people when the next flood happens, and we know there will be a next flood. Ultimately, it's another deeded parcel of open space, and I know that the town planning and zoning, guidance document every 10 years, planning development document, is always pushing the town to acquire open space. We're heavily developed for such a small community, so any parcel is a benefit to the town. I think another thing that will come of it is the fact that should we in the future also be able to do similar projects, that this may end up being a larger parcel, if you will, of open space. But that's a lot of hurdles we have to hit for that. So I do believe it achieves a lot for a 25% cost share of the town.
And we have precedent for sharing this kind of a cost in the past?
Yes, they acquired 33 Cherry Street back in 2010, and we also elevated one house. When you elevate, the 25% cost share is through the homeowner, and that was done in 2010 as well. So those are the 2 grants that I am familiar with that the town has utilized the FEMA grant process for.
And if we did not support the town putting in the 25%, what happens?
It wouldn't move forward.
So they don't have access to that $500,000 from FEMA, no matter if we don't vote for the 25%.
Correct.
Mark, I think you spoke earlier about the timing of, like, right now, based on recent emergencies and so forth, there's X dollars available. And they approve this process now. How long does typically something like this take? And has there been situations in the past where if we didn't act when we had the opportunity to, where the fund's not available?
Ordinarily, FEMA grants have a 2-year window. So if it was approved, fully approved by your body and the RTM, the grant use is available for 2 years. And that has to have the ability to close out the grant for auditing purposes, et cetera. What I was told 3 or 4 days after the July 9th storm by FEMA and the state was that this money could be available to the homeowner as quickly as 60 days. And I just want to remind everyone, they are homeless. They can't rebuild this house. It's a difficult situation. I don't think many of us can find ourselves in that situation. And if you haven't been around town during a flooding event like this, I think it's almost impossible to imagine the scope of this emergency as it relates to a family. We are talking about our neighbors and our family members, and it's just hard to fathom that, you suffer such a significant event that you can't rebuild your property, and that's where they find themselves. And I think this is a relatively good decision on behalf of the town to assist someone in such a dire strait.
Dan?
Yeah, Taylor, another, I think, answer to your question is we're acquiring a piece of property at roughly 25% of the market value. And so we're not getting 25% of the deed, we're getting 100% of the deed for 25% of the price, roughly. So I don't know if I agree with everything Mark just said about the soft benefits of doing this to the town. The economic benefit, to me, I'm not sure that property is really usable open space, but we are acquiring it, for the town. Fair market value goes to the family, but we only pay 25% of it.
And were all of these events in the history of the home under the current owner?
No, so I believe they took ownership, and I could be corrected if I'm wrong, about six to 8 years ago. My math might be a little fuzzy, but no, the house has had several owners that have suffered through the floods, and the house is sold in between. So it's had several owners.
And we have you said like 7 more properties that are lined up to do the same thing?
We have 7 people that would like to apply for the grant. I really can't speculate on their possibilities to achieve that benefit cost analysis. I think there's significant relationship on the number of claims you apply for during the process of your insurance claim for flood insurance. It's interesting to me to find out that many people who are required to have flood insurance many times often cancel it along the way. That's not the case here. But what it does leave is that some people who have recently moved into their homes and found out how bad the flooding actually is, because many people think just because you have to have flood insurance that, okay, it floods, but what's the scope of that? And now they've realized the scope. And I know there's one gentleman that's a Crimmins Road neighbor that's on this call as well. It really is eye-opening and disheartening to know that such young families can move into residence with no knowledge whatsoever, depending on how they purchase the home. So my heart goes out to everybody. I think they're all aware of that. And I know this is a monetary decision on behalf of the town, but in the long term, it really is. And I did want to say the 25% for 100% of the property. And I think in the future, we may see more requests, but you have to make a hurdle, and it's not a short hurdle. It's taken us 4 applications at least that I can recall just for this one property. So it's been about a 7-year process.
And you may not be able to answer this question, but is there a quick way of describing the reasoning for the 25% share on behalf of the town? Why does FEMA not take it all on?
And that's just the way FEMA operates. They have a 75-25, and that goes for all their disaster assistance as well. So when we put in for COVID expenses, for instance, it's at a 75-25. Not sure how or why Congress acted that way, but that's pretty much all of their grants. They do have 2 other grants that run periodically. One's flood assistance, and I forgot the name of the other one. I think it's pre-disaster mitigation assistance. And those are at a different cost ratio, but the projects they fund are totally not in the scope of what we're trying to achieve here.
Thanks.
I hope that helps.
And Mark, I think you mentioned last night on the call that, the requirement is that the house and the garage is demolished, the driveway and any other, I think you said impervious layer is ripped up, but then nothing else can be done to the land.
Correct. So the only thing that my mind can't wrap around is the fact that the property couldn't transfer, say, to like the land trust. I mean, their goal, and I believe it's a nonprofit solely for the goal of open space. I've never looked into that. I don't know if the town should at some point look into whether that could happen, but currently, this would join the 33 Cherry Street. We have to go through all those hurdles to demo the structures and get rid of the impervious surfaces and any other, structure. There happens to be a flagpole on the property that has to come out too. but you're basically left with just an open lawn, if you will. They want it restored to prior to construction. So prior to when those houses were built, they want it to resemble as closely as possible that effect.
Mark, what's the timing of when the homeowners would receive this funding and you would start your processes to demo the house?
So today, this morning, first thing, we had several documents that were due into FEMA for their final approval, if you will. I'm expecting, based on FEMA's relaying to us, that they had about a 60-day window, and that was Tuesday, I think it was July 13th or 12th, if my memory's correct. And they said a 60-day window. So if all the bodies and the RTM approve it, I think we're looking at October, November to commence the project. And I'm hoping to close it out as quickly as possible. It's very difficult. I know the homeowners in the neighborhood there have expressed frustration with the fact that the building had been started to be remediated. They were worried about mold and things like that after the flood. And then the project had to stop because they can't rebuild based on the 50% rule. So we'd like to get in and get done as quickly as possible. So I'm hoping October start, maybe November, and then be done by January, February. And the seed, grass seed or whatever may have to wait till the spring, but I'd like to wrap it up within 6 months. And that's what we used on our guidance document for FEMA's application.
Okay. Rob, did you have a question?
I did. Hey, Mark, just a couple of questions. So I think you might have said 6 flooding incidents for $600,000 here, right? Was the FEMA flood insurance activated on any of the prior claims?
So those are all flood insurance claims. So in order to utilize the FEMA grant, you have to have prior damage from and claims to flood insurance. So there's actually 9 from 1979 to the present, and it totals around $600,000. What happened? The house was built in 51 to 79. I have no knowledge. It would be hard to fathom that those decades could go by without some flooding. But the records that are provided to us, the town, are from 79 to the present. So 9 events totaling about 600,000. And they got more expensive as time went on, obviously, for cost reasons with repair of the damage.
So is this just FEMA at some point getting smart, going, we've already paid out 600 for this, let's just take this thing down?
I believe if you do any Google searching, if you will, they've been hammered with flood insurance and how it operates for many decades. They've made some pretty big pushes to turn this around. One is that people that have flood insurance are paying a bigger burden. So what was relayed to me is some people that had claims in the past were paying around $800 a year, are now paying like $4,200 a year. So there's a shift in that. And then the other shift is to do more in mitigation, take the money that's made and use it for mitigation of future disasters. If we take the property and we deed it open space, if it floods, you go out, it's like cleaning up the ball field on Renshaw Road. Every time we have a flood, you have to go out and do some yard work, so to speak. But other than that, there's really no claim.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for Mark on this? Jim, any other points you wanted to raise from your work earlier today?
No, I've covered everything.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay.
You
All
know,
right.
I'd like to see,
Frank.
I'd like to see if we approve this, that the homeowner agree to pursue the home insurance component to this, the homeowner's insurance that would reduce the town cost. And I don't mean they have to sue the insurance company, but they certainly need to fill out all the forms, that kind of thing.
Mark, do you have a perspective on that as to whether the homeowners?
If I am reading your question or statement correctly, there is 2 components of flood insurance. One is for the structure, The other one is for personal belongings. So I don't know if any of that can be utilized towards this process, but I do know the increased cost of compliance component, which is an additional up to $30,000, if they apply for that, would have to be turned back towards the town's share or FEMA share. So that would have to be. So they are trying to get that. The only thing currently that's holding that up is getting the letter from the town that says their 50% rule has been met and the building is substantially damaged, which means they cannot rebuild without coming into compliance. And that all has to be done within 60 days of their insurance claim. They are trying to achieve that.
That's a good question. Great. Other questions for Mark or anybody else? Okay. Motion to approve. Okay, Rob, second. Jim, all in favor? Okay, I'm going to abstain on this because I know the homeowners personally and live right next to me, so I will abstain, but this passes 5-0 and 1 abstention. Okay. Mark, Kate, thanks very much for your help. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's that. Item number 4 has been tabled. The Board of Selectmen did not take up the acquisition of this Zen City software platform for this ARP fund committee that's going to be formed to get public input. So that is tabled and we won't take that up tonight. Let's go to the other fiscal 21 transfers. So the first one up is we've got Public Works for motorized equipment. Jennifer.
Ed was not able to be here, but I think most of his explanations are pretty thorough. On this particular one, he needs to transfer $28,517. He has it within his overtime salary that was unused. During COVID, they had a single occupancy policy in vehicles, so there was additional use of the vehicles, therefore additional wear and tear and additional need for maintenance. And then they also had some unexpected large equipment repairs.
This all makes sense to me, and these are repairs like this are normal. Any questions about this one? Okay, motion to approve. Dan, second. Jim, all in favor? Okay, 6-0, very good. Next up is some heating fuel.
So this one, again, all of these, he has money within his budget. He's just moving around within his budget. There were some issues with the air sensors in their truck bays, which they have replaced and calibrated with their building management system. So they did go over on heating fuel. He said it was an odd increase and he should be fine for fiscal 22, but they're going to continue to monitor it throughout the winter.
This is all heating fuel for the Public Works garage?
Correct.
Okay. All right, questions about this? Motion to approve? Okay, Rob, second. Dan, all in favor? Okay. All right. Next up, solid waste disposal, $35,232.
This is mainly driven by COVID. They saw a 15% increase in their municipal solid waste arriving at the transfer station. People were home, they were cleaning things out and bringing them to the transfer station.
Okay, and this is just a volume issue, not a segregation issue of the
Correct.
materials that were brought by? Okay. And the fees are just delivery fees or the payments that we paid to have all this transferred over to the, got it, okay. Other questions on this one? Okay, motion to approve. Dan, second. Rob, all in favor? Okay, terrific. Electricity costs.
Electricity, he needs to transfer $25,000 to cover a deficit. And there were two causes. 701 Boston Post Road, where we have EMS, they're back to using the building full time now that the construction of the Royal is complete. So that increased the electricity bills. And then we had airflow adjustments in Town Hall for additional circulation because of COVID-19. And looking ahead to 22, Ed's got to keep an eye on this because with the increased air exchange in the building, thinks there may be some additional electricity usage, but probably not to this extent in the next year.
That was the question that I had. Other questions? Okay, motion to approve. Oh, Jim, sorry.
Yeah, Jen, what was the breakdown in terms of the additional electricity in town hall versus the use of the post road property?
I don't know the exact breakdown, but the vast majority of it would be town hall.
Got it. Okay.
Okay, motion to approve. Rob, second. Jim. All in favor? Okay, great. All right, and then last one up here, this is for some motor fuel and lubricants.
Right. Again, related to the single occupancy policy, driving more vehicles to comply with that policy resulted in the use of more fuel. And that policy is no longer in effect. So assuming that continues for fiscal 22, the budget should be sufficient.
Okay, other questions on this? Anything? Motion to approve? Okay, Dan, Frank, second. Okay, all in favor? Good. Okay, that gets us through all the transfers. We already did the police. Jen, you said you had a very brief comment on financial report.
Very brief. I just wanted to give you an update. I don't have a formal report on fiscal 21, but we've completed our last check run. We'll be turning over all of our books to auditors on August 30th. So most things are very complete at this moment. So a couple of highlights, we expect to increase fund balance by just under $600,000. So we have revenue surpluses and expenditure surpluses that have more than offset what we drew down from the fund balance. The projection for June 30th is just over $26 million of unassigned fund balance, which is 17% of the fiscal 22 adopted budget. The main things that changed since we did a projection back in April, it was mostly on the revenue side. Tax revenue came in more than what we had projected. Town clerk revenue also came in more, and solid waste fees came in more. On the expenditure side, the last I heard from Board of Ed, even though we're not quite done tying out with them, is they expect to return $1.3 million. On the town side, we have an expenditure surplus of about $1.2 million. And overall revenue surplus is about $2.6 million.
And the net of all that is the 600 fund balance contribution.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I don't have any questions. I look forward to kind of seeing the final summary of that. As I mentioned before, it'd be great to have that budget sheet that we have for the Board of Finance updated so we can have a clear view as to how it all turned out and can have that record for next year.
And I will have some final cleanup fiscal 21 transfers for you at the September meeting.
Okay. Any questions on the financial report for Jennifer? Okay, next up, approval of minutes. And so these are our minutes for last meeting on July 20th. I have looked through these and I did not have any edits. Does anyone have any comments or edits, questions on the minutes? Looks like, yes, we were all there. Questions, comments on the edits? Okay, Dan, as always, your review of all these is much appreciated. We hardly have any edits when you do that, so thank you. All right, motion to approve the minutes from July 20th. Okay, Rob, second. Jim, all in favor? Great, so that's got our minutes up. Okay, special assignments and committee reports. Let's see, Ox Ridge. Dan.
Yeah, very briefly, project continues to be on time, under budget. The entire team is very focused on readying the parking lot and roadway for the teachers' return to school, which is, I think, next week, and is highly confident that will occur. I've previously reported some concerns for delays with respect to Eversource and some other conduits. The team attacked that aggressively with time and thought, and again, we remain on track to be ready to go on school reopening. And the procurement issues that we spoke of a couple of months ago seem to be well in hand. I think there's only one There's only one item that I've seen that is at any rate delayed because of raw material shortages, and it's not going to delay the project. It's just delaying the expected receipt of that supply.
That's great. Tremendous progress, particularly in a difficult supply chain environment. That's really good. Jennifer, it might be interesting next month to take a look at just the flow of borrowed funds and all of that, and just get a sense for how all that looks at this stage. I know we normally have something like that in the financial report, but maybe a closer look at that next month would be good.
Sure, and we will need to go out to bond probably December, January timeframe,
Okay.
because they are spending money very quickly.
Okay, that was my second question. Very good. Other questions for Dan on this? Okay, well done. Any other committee reports? I guess just audit. I guess we'll get started with that process with the receipt of the fiscal 21 final numbers. So probably not much there for now. Okay. Let's see, chairman's report. I don't have anything to add except that Jamie had mentioned that she was pulling together an ARPA funds committee. And so the purpose of this committee is going to be to get elected official as well as public input into the expenditure of those funds, which are 6.2 million, if I have that right, parsed out over time, like in 2 payments, correct? And we've got the first tranche. Is that right, Jennifer?
Correct.
Okay, so a large amount of money to be sure. And so one of the important things is making sure we've got input from a variety of sources and constituencies to get to a good decision on that. So I think it was a good idea to appoint a committee for that. She and I talked about it the other day, and what we'll do is probably provide input, I guess, in September in terms of committee makeup here. So, and what the Board of Finance will contribute to that effort. So more to come on that. Other than that, I don't have anything else for the chairman's report. Does anyone else have anything for this evening? Outstanding. Okay. I think we are done then. Motion to adjourn. Okay, Rob, second. Jim. All right, friends, all in favor? Very good. We stand adjourned. Thanks very much, Jennifer. Thank you as always, and we will see all of you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
All right, take care.